My name is Rachel Carter. I'm 34 years old from Columbus, Ohio. I work as a nurse in the emergency room, and for most of my life, I thought my flaw was that I was too trusting, and maybe it was. Pause because that flaw almost destroyed me. I want you to picture this. The night my husband told me, with that smug little smirk on his face, "You're nothing without me, Rachel." He said it slowly, like a dagger twisting in my chest, and the sick part, at that moment, I believed him, but here's the truth he never saw coming. I made him lose everything, everything he thought he owned, and when it was over, all he had left was the echo of his own arrogance. That's my story, and I'm finally ready to tell it. Stories like mine are real, and if you want to hear more, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell, because the next story, you don't want to miss it. And now I want to ask you something. Which state are you watching this from? Are you here in California, Texas, New York, Florida, or maybe somewhere else across the US? Drop your state in the comments below. I'll be reading. I met Daniel when I was 25. I was just starting my nursing career, working long shifts, juggling night classes to get my BSN. He was 31, confident, the kind of man who filled a room the second he walked in. A financial advisor, sharp suit, sharp smile. Back then, I thought he was everything I didn't have. I came from a blue-collar family. Dad worked construction, Mom worked at a grocery store. Love was simple, money was scarce, and pride came from hard work. Daniel was different. Expensive cologne, a lease BMW. Stories about traveling to Miami, New York, and Vegas. When he looked at me across that bar, it felt like being chosen. Like he saw something in me that no one else had. And I'll admit it, I fell fast. At first, he called me his angel, said I grounded him. He'd pick me up after 12-hour shifts, cook dinner, rub my shoulders, and make me feel like I was safe. But slowly, little things began to shift. He'd say, "You don't need to worry about money. I'll handle it." And because I was exhausted, I let him. He said, "You work too hard. I'll take care of the bills, the accounts, and the planning. Just focus on being a great nurse." It sounded like love, like a partnership, but really, it was the first lock snapping shut. We got married when I was 28. A small ceremony his parents insisted on paying for. For the first few years, I thought we were happy. We had a modest house in a decent suburb. Daniel liked to host parties, friends, clients, and his coworkers. I would play the dutiful wife, smiling as he told stories about how lucky he was to have me, but in private, the tone was different. If I questioned a purchase, he'd snap. If I asked about our savings, he'd roll his eyes and say, "You wouldn't understand. It's complicated." And every time I protested, he'd remind me, "You don't have to worry about this stuff. Just trust me." And I did, because I was tired, because I wanted peace, because deep down, I was afraid of losing him. One night, after a party, I found him in the kitchen with a drink in his hand. I had just cleaned up, exhausted, makeup smudged, hair pinned back. I asked him softly, "Daniel, do you ever think we'll have kids?" He laughed, actually laughed. Then he looked at me and said, calm, almost bored, "Rachel, you're nothing without me. You know that, right?" The words hit me like a physical blow. I froze, searching his face, waiting for him to take it back. But he didn't. He just sipped his drink, set it down, and walked away. That night, something inside me cracked. I told myself it was just a cruel moment. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he didn't mean it, but a week later, I stumbled across something I wasn't supposed to see. An envelope shoved in the back of his desk drawer. It had my name on it, my signature, but I had never signed it, a document that would change everything I thought I knew about my marriage. And in that moment, I realized my husband's secret wasn't just betrayal. It was a trap. My hands were shaking when I pulled that envelope from the drawer. It was thick, sealed, but not taped all the way. Like he had gotten careless, I told myself I shouldn't open it. That snooping wasn't right, but something deeper, darker, whispered that I had to. So I slid my finger along the edge, peeled it open, and pulled out the papers. The first page was a bank document. It had both our names on it, but the signature under mine wasn't mine. It was close, the way a child mimics handwriting, but I knew. Every loop, every angle was just off. My heart dropped into my stomach. The papers detailed a transfer, large sums, accounts I didn't even recognize, and there it was, my forged approval. I whispered out loud, "Oh my God, Daniel." I dropped the papers back into the envelope, shoved it closed, and sat there in the dark office with my chest heaving. This wasn't just control. This was theft, and he was using me to do it. For days, I pretended nothing happened. At work, I went through the motions. I charted patients, handed out meds, and smiled at families. But inside, my mind raced. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe he had permission somehow. But every time I replayed his words, "You're nothing without me," my blood boiled. He hadn't just said it out of cruelty. He believed it. And that belief permitted him to destroy me without a second thought. One evening, I tried to probe. I said casually, "Hey, I was thinking about checking our savings account. Maybe we could start putting money aside for a trip." Daniel's eyes flickered for just a second. Panic, irritation, before he smoothed it over with a smile. He kissed my cheek and said, "Don't worry, Angel. I've got everything handled. You just focus on work." But his voice was just a little too tight, and I knew he was hiding something. It was small things at first. Late nights when he claimed to be meeting clients, new clothes I hadn't seen him buy, receipts stuffed in his pockets, steakhouses, hotel bars, jewelry stores. When I asked, he'd wave it off. Business expenses. Don't snoop. And because I was still scared of being wrong, I let it slide. But every night, when he fell asleep, I stared at his face and thought, "Who are you? And what have you done in my name?" I couldn't tell my parents. They loved Daniel, thought he was so successful. I couldn't tell my friends. They would just tell me to leave. But leaving didn't feel possible. Not when the house, the accounts, even the damn car, everything was under his name, or at least, that's what I thought. Because late one night, I crept back into his office and started digging deeper, and what I found was worse than I could have imagined. There were more papers, credit cards in my name, maxed out, loans I never applied for. Even a mortgage application declined because my credit was already poisoned. I covered my mouth to stop myself from screaming. He hadn't just stolen from me. He had buried me alive in debt, all while smiling at me across dinner tables, telling me how lucky I was to have him. 2 days later, while I was on shift at the hospital, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. A man's voice said, "Is this Rachel Carter?" I hesitated. Yes. The man lowered his voice. This is about your husband. You need to know the truth." And before I could respond, he hung up. I stood in that fluorescent lit hallway, phone pressed to my ear, blood rushing in my veins. Daniel's secret wasn't just mine to uncover anymore. Someone else knew. I couldn't breathe. That voice on the phone, it was steady, low, almost clinical. "This is about your husband. You need to know the truth." And then silence. I stood there in the hospital hallway, my scrubs sticking to my skin, monitors beeping in the background. My whole body felt like it had dropped through the floor. I tried to call the number back. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "Who are you? What do you mean? Please talk to me." No reply. For the rest of the shift, my hands trembled every time my phone buzzed. But nothing came. When I got home that night, Daniel was already there, shirt unbuttoned, drink in hand, watching sports on the TV like his world was perfectly intact. I studied his face, every smile line, every flicker in his eyes, and I thought, "What are you hiding from me?" The next day, the man called again. This time, I stepped outside into the cold air behind the hospital, heart pounding. "Who is this?" I demanded. He didn't answer directly. His voice was cautious but urgent. "Your husband isn't who you think he is. He's not just stealing from you. He's in deep." My throat went dry. "Deep in what?" The man sighed. "Debt. Fraud. He's using you as a shield. And if he goes down, you go down with him." My stomach turned. I whispered, "Why are you telling me this?" He hesitated. Then, "Because I was one of his clients, and he ruined me." And before I could say another word, he hung up again. That night, I confronted Daniel carefully. I said, "You seem stressed lately. Is everything okay with work?" He smirked. "Work is fine, Angel. You just worry too much." But there was sweat at his hairline, a twitch in his jaw, and when his phone buzzed on the counter, he grabbed it before I could even glance at the screen. "Business," he muttered, walking into the other room. I sat there in the kitchen, staring at my untouched dinner, realizing the truth. I was living with a stranger who was dragging me into his darkness. For weeks, I was a ghost in my own life. At work, I stitched wounds and comforted families. At home, I played the quiet, obedient wife, but inside, I was unraveling. I started sleeping on the edge of the bed, my back to him. I hid money in an old aspirin bottle in the bathroom. Every time he touched me, my skin crawled, and every night, his words echoed in my skull. "You're nothing without me." Then came the call that changed everything. This time, the man didn't hang up. "I have proof," he said. His voice was steady, almost calm. "Emails, bank records. He forged your name on more than one account. If you want to see them, meet me." My voice shook. "Meet you? Where?" He told me. "A diner on the edge of town." I should have said no. I should have been scared. But something stronger than fear was rising inside me now. Resolve. I drove there in the rain. My wipers slapped back and forth as if counting down the seconds of my old life. When I walked inside, I saw him. Mid-40s, tired eyes. The suit that had once been expensive, now frayed. He introduced himself only as Mark. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of bank transfers. My signature was forged again and again. He said softly, "He did the same to me. Took everything." When I confronted him, he laughed. Said I couldn't touch him. I swallowed hard. "Why are you helping me?" Mark's jaw tightened. "Because the only way men like him fall is if someone close to them pushes. I drove home that night with the folder on the passenger seat, rain still hammering the windshield. For the first time, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone holding a match, and Daniel was standing in a house soaked in gasoline. He had no idea what was coming. When I walked back into the house that night, folder clutched tight against my chest, Daniel was in the living room with a glass of scotch. The smell hit me before his words did. He smiled lazily. Long shift, Angel? I nodded, forcing a smile. Yeah, exhausting. Inside, though, my blood was ice. Because now, I had proof. The next few days, I said nothing. I cooked his dinners. I folded his laundry. I laughed at the right times, but inside, I was cataloging every word, every receipt, every twitch of his mouth. When his phone lit up, Daniel thought he had lulled me. But really, I was watching him the way I watch trauma patients in the ER, looking for the hidden signs of collapse. And no, he was collapsing. He was careless when he drank. One night, he stumbled into the bedroom and dropped his phone onto the carpet. I picked it up to hand it back, and for a brief second, the screen lit. A woman's name flashed in a message preview, not a coworker, not a client. The words were short, intimate. Last night was worth the risk. I kept my face still, even as my stomach clenched. He was stealing my future, forging my name, and sleeping with someone else. Lying awake that night, I made a vow not to confront him. Not yet. No men like Daniel thrived on confrontation. They twisted it, turned it, and made you question yourself. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to build something quiet. Something he couldn't see until it was too late. My revenge would be patient. The next day, on my lunch break, I went to a credit union downtown. I opened a small account in my name only, deposited just a few $100s cash I'd been hiding away. The teller smiled, asked if I wanted a joint account with my husband. I forced a polite laugh. No, this is just for me. Walking out of that building, holding my new debit card, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. That night, I tested him. At dinner, I said, I was thinking of maybe handling some of the bills, just to take some stress off you. Daniel's fork clinked against his plate. He looked at me, calm but sharp. No, he said firmly. I told you, I handle all of that. I tilted my head. Why not let me try? His jaw tightened. Then came that smirk, the one that made me feel small. He leaned in and whispered, almost gleeful, because you'd be lost without me, Rachel. You always have been. I smiled back, but in my head I thought, keep talking. You have no idea how much rope you're giving me. I met Mark again, this time in daylight, at a library cafe. He slid me another folder. This one had emails, spreadsheets, and correspondence between Daniel and other clients he had gutted. Mark said, he's been laundering through personal accounts, using your name to shield himself from liability. If the feds look, they'll see you first. My stomach turned. So what do I do? Mark's eyes were steady. You build your own case, quietly, paper trails, screenshots, copies. Don't let him know until it's all ready. I nodded, clutching the folder. And in that moment, I wasn't just his victim anymore. I was his shadow. That week, I bought a small fireproof box, kept it under the bed in the guest room, where Daniel never went. Every night, while he showered or slept, I slipped in documents, copies of his statements, screenshots of texts, Receipts I photographed, each page felt like a weapon sharpening in my hands, and Daniel, oblivious, poured himself another drink, smirked at me across the kitchen, and thought he was untouchable. One night, as I was tucking the newest papers into my hidden box, I heard his footsteps in the hall. My heart leapt into my throat. I shoved the lid closed, slid it under the bed, and turned just as the door opened. Daniel leaned against the frame, eyes narrowed. "What are you doing in here, Angel?" he asked softly. My pulse pounded so loud I could barely hear myself. I smiled thinly. "Just organizing some old stuff." He studied me for a long moment, too long, and then, slowly, he smiled back, but his eyes said he didn't. Believe me, he stood in the doorway longer than he should have. The hall light cast his face in half shadow, his smirk barely visible. "What are you organizing?" he asked again, softer this time. I forced a laugh, waved a stack of random papers. In my hand, old bills. "You know me, I hoard receipts." He stepped into the room, slowly, like a predator testing its prey, then almost too casually, he reached past me, opened the guest closet, and looked inside, empty. When he turned back, his smile was wider, but it didn't reach his eyes. After that night, something shifted. Daniel started watching me closely, asking where I went, who I saw, and what time I'd be home. If I picked up my phone too fast, he'd say, "Who are you texting?" If I came home 10 minutes late, he'd mutter, "Strange how your shifts always run over." His suspicion was like smoke, curling into every corner of our house, but I learned to play along. I smiled more, kissed him longer, laughed at his jokes like I used to. Inside, though, I was counting every move he made. One night, after too much scotch, Daniel passed out on the couch, his phone buzzed on the table. For once, it didn't have a lock screen. I picked it up with trembling hands. The messages weren't from clients. They were from her. Her name was Elena. "I hate when you have to go back to her. When is she out of the picture? You promise me." I sat there in the glow of that screen, my chest tight, bile rising in my throat. He wasn't just stealing my money. He was rehearsing my replacement. I walked into the bathroom, locked the door, and slid to the floor. For an hour, I stared at the tile and let the silence crush me. Because this was it. I was nothing to him. Not a partner, not a wife, just a name to forge, a body to control, a placeholder until his new life was ready. I could hear his words again, sharp as glass in my skull. "You're nothing without me." But now I knew the truth. He believed it so much, he was building a future without me already. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror, eyes swollen, hair tangled, skin pale under hospital lighting, and I whispered to my reflection, "No, I'm not nothing." That calm was terrifying even to me, because it meant my fear had burned away. What was left wasn't rage. It was something colder. I copied the texts, every single one. I sent them to a hidden email I had set up, one that Daniel could never trace. At the hospital. I slipped into the records room during my break, printed my pay stubs, tax forms, and anything that proved my income had never touched the accounts he was draining. I kept building my little firebox of truth, page by page, weapon by weapon. Then Daniel made a mistake. At a dinner one night, he was unusually cheerful. "Big client deal closed today," he bragged, pouring more wine into his glass. I smiled politely. "That's great, honey. What's his name?" He froze. just for a second, then covered it with a laugh. Doesn't matter. You wouldn't know him, but I saw it. That flash, that stumble, and I thought, you're not invincible. You're already cracking. The following weekend, I told him I was working a double shift. In reality, I met Mark at the diner again. I handed him a USB stick. Everything I've collected so far. Mark scrolled through the files, nodding. You're building a strong case, but you need one final piece. Proof he knew he was using your name illegally. I swallowed. And how do I get that? Mark's eyes were steady. You make him admit it. On record, that night, I crawled into bed beside Daniel, my voice soft, sweet. I rested my head on his chest and whispered, Baby, I know you've been handling so much. I don't deserve you. His hand stroked my hair. Damn right, you don't. I smiled in the dark, then I whispered, Someday, maybe you'll show me how you do it. All those accounts in my name, all those signatures. You're brilliant, Daniel. His chest rose with pride, and then he said the words I'd been waiting for, the ones that, if recorded, could destroy him forever. His chest was warm under my cheek, steady in the dark. Daniel loved these moments, the ones where he thought I was pliant, worshipful, in awe of him. And that's when he talked too much. I had hidden the smallest recorder I could find inside my nightstand drawer. Cheap, battery-powered, but good enough. Before slipping into bed that night, I clicked it on. The red light glowed for just a second, then disappeared into the dark. I rested close to him, my voice soft, curious, admiring. Baby, I just don't understand how you do it. All those accounts in my name, all those signatures. Daniel chuckled, arrogant. Because I'm smarter than everyone else, Angel. That's how. I let my fingers trace lazy circles on his chest, as though I were mesmerized. But doesn't that get risky? Using me like that? He smirked. Risky for you, maybe, but not for me. My heart hammered. What do you mean? Daniel sighed like he was explaining something to a child. Rachel, everything is in your name. If anyone comes knocking, they'll see you first. And you'll take the fall. That's why you'll never leave me. You'd be ruined without me. Voice breaking, hearing it out loud, so casually, almost broke me, but I forced my voice steady. So you really forged my name? He laughed. Of course I did. More than once. And you didn't even notice. That's how easy you are to control. I lay there frozen. My breath is shallow. Every word had been captured. Every sneer, every smirk hidden in his tone. And Daniel? He had no idea. He kissed the top of my head, whispered, You'll always need me, Angel. I whispered back, Always. But my hands were fists under the blanket, because now I had the bullet for my gun. The next week, I played my role harder than ever. I let my shoulders slump. I let him see me sigh. When he barked, I didn't push back. I even whispered one night, trembling, Maybe you're right. Maybe I'd be lost without you. He grinned, kissed me, and poured another drink, believing every word. And while he celebrated his own brilliance, I was duplicating that recording. One copy on a USB, one email to a hidden cloud account, one in my fireproof box. No matter what happened, I would never lose it. I met Mark again, slid him the copy of the recording. He listened with clenched jaw, eyes closing as Daniel's voice spilled from the device. When it ended, he exhaled slowly. This is enough to bury him, I whispered. Then let's bury him. But Mark shook his head. Not yet. You need to let him sink further. You want him stripped bare, don't you? I stared at him, my heart pounding. Yes, I want him destroyed. But the more I plotted, the sharper Daniel's eyes became. One night, he cornered me in the kitchen to close, his breath thick with whiskey. You've been quiet, Angel. Different. I forced a smile. Just tired. He studied me. Long. Too long. Then he tilted his head, whispered, You're not hiding something, are you? My blood went cold, but I leaned up, kissed him softly, and murmured, Hide something from you? Never, he smirked, satisfied. But his eyes told me he didn't fully believe me. That night, I lay awake listening to his breathing beside me. I realized the danger had shifted. It wasn't just about building a case anymore. It was about time, because Daniel was starting to sense the trap, and if he caught me before it was finished, I wasn't sure I'd make it out alive. Daniel thrived on appearances. Every Friday night, he took me to client dinners, charity events, and networking parties where he could shine. He'd grip my waist, whisper, Smile, Angel. They love us when you smile. I would obey, but now, when I watched him tell his stories, I saw cracks forming in the mask. At one event, a client asked casually, So Rachel, how do you feel about all those new investments in your name? My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Investments? In my name? Daniel jumped in too quickly. Oh, she leaves all that to me. Doesn't want to be bothered, the client chuckled. But I caught the flicker in Daniel's eyes, sharp warning, when I smiled politely and said, Yes, I trust him completely. His hand squeezed my thigh under the table, hard enough to bruise. That night, I added another secret photograph to my fireproof box. The purple mark blooming on my skin, proof of the violence that lived beneath his charm. I started planting seeds, little comments to his colleagues at parties. Oh, Daniel never tells me much about his business. Sometimes I wonder what he's hiding, said with a laugh, a tilt of the head, like a joke, but I saw the glances. People filed the thought away, and once seeds of doubt are planted, they grow. Mark called me one morning. His voice was urgent. Daniel's clients are starting to pull money. Word is spreading that he mishandles funds. Did you say something? I hesitated. I may have let a few things slip. Mark's sigh was half amusement, half warning. Be careful. Men like him don't collapse quietly. They thrash. I swallowed. Good. Let him thrash. One evening, Daniel came home furious. He slammed his briefcase onto the counter, pacing. Like a caged animal, they're turning on me, Rachel. Whispers, rumors someone's poisoning them against me. I kept my voice calm, soft. Oh, honey, maybe they're just jealous of your success. His eyes narrowed, searching me, and then he spat. You'd be nothing if I hadn't married you. Don't forget that. He stormed off, leaving the smell of whiskey and rage in the air. I sat at the kitchen table, hands trembling, but a slow smile spread across my face because he didn't know it, but every outburst made him more vulnerable. At night, I still lie awake listening to his breathing, wondering if he'd ever snap all the way. I imagined headlines. Local nurse found dead in suburban home. I imagined my parents bewildered, betrayed, and still, I didn't leave because leaving meant losing the chance to finish it. To make him choke on the empire he built out of my name. The turning point came at a charity gala. Daniel was drunker than usual, bragging louder than usual. A colleague teased him, Careful, Daniel, or your wife will start taking the credit. Daniel's laugh was sharp, ugly. She couldn't run a lemonade stand without me. She's nothing. Nothing. The room went quiet for a beat too long. Eyes flicked toward me. I smiled, lifted my glass, and said sweetly, "Well, I suppose we all know who the real star is then." The laughter returned, but the damage was done. They had seen the crack. That night, Daniel didn't speak on the drive home. When we pulled into the driveway, he sat in the dark car for a long time, gripping the wheel until his knuckles turned white. Then he whispered, almost to himself, "Someone's against me. Someone close." And for the first time, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. He was starting to realize the war had already begun. The silence in that car was heavier than anything I'd ever felt. Daniel, gripping the steering wheel, muttering about enemies, betrayal, someone close. He didn't look at me, but I knew he was starting to suspect. The next morning, while Daniel was in the shower, I slipped his laptop bag into the guest room. Inside were contracts, spreadsheets, and half-signed forms. I photographed everything. Then, during my lunch break at the hospital, I sent the files anonymously to one of his biggest clients. 2 days later, Daniel came home slamming doors. "Do you believe these idiots? Pulling funds, demanding audits. Bunch of cowards." I forced a frown. "That's awful, honey." Inside, my pulse thrummed with satisfaction. Because it had worked, I didn't flood the world with everything I had. No, that would be reckless. Instead, I dripped it out. A copy of a forged signature was sent anonymously to a bank. Screenshots of his texts to another client. Pieces, fragments, just enough to unravel the edges of his reputation. Like slow poison, it spread. The next week, I went with him to another dinner. Only this time, the room wasn't warm with laughter. Whispers followed him. Smiles were thinner. And when one colleague raised a glass, his toast was sharp to honesty. In business and marriage, the table chuckled, but Daniel's jaw locked. He barely touched his food. On the drive home, he snapped, "You see? They're turning on me. Because they're weak. They can't handle someone like me." I kept my face soft. "Maybe they're just learning who you really are." His head whipped toward me, eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" I shrugged lightly. "Nothing." But the seed was planted. That night, I heard him pacing downstairs, glasses clinking, liquor pouring. At one point, he shouted into the empty air, "You think you can touch me? I own everything." His voice cracked, raw. I crept halfway down the stairs, watching him from the shadows. He was a man unraveling, talking to ghosts, drunk on fear, and I realized the world was beginning to see what I had always known. Mark and I met in the library cafe again. I handed him the USB with the recording. "This is the nail," I whispered. Mark's eyes flicked to mine. "Once this goes public, there's no turning back. You'll be part of it too." I nodded. My voice is steady. "I want him stripped bare." The next week, it leaked. An anonymous file was sent to regulatory investigators with a recording attached. Daniel's own voice, smug and drunk. "Rachel's my shield. Everything's in her name. She'll take the fall, not me." Phones rang nonstop. Clients pulled out. The firm suspended him pending investigation. And Daniel? He came home one night, face gray, suit rumpled, tie hanging loose. "They're coming after me, Rachel," he muttered. "After us." I tilted my head. "Us? Yes. You're on everything. You're nothing without me. You'll go down too." I let my eyes water, just enough. Then maybe you shouldn't have used my name. His face went pale. That night, he didn't drink. He just sat in the dark, staring at nothing, whispering to himself, and for the first time since I had known him, I saw fear outweigh arrogance, but fear makes dangerous men even more dangerous, and I knew the real confrontation was coming. The house felt different that week, quiet, but not peaceful, like a storm crouched on the horizon, waiting to break. Daniel barely spoke. He drank less, but his eyes were always moving and watching me and measuring me, and I knew he was circling. One night, he finally snapped. I had just come home from a late shift when he grabbed me by the wrist and dragged me into the living room. His face was red, his eyes bloodshot. "You think I don't know, Rachel?" he hissed. My voice trembled. "Know what?" He shoved me back against the couch. "Someone's leaking my files, my recordings, my goddamn words. And it started the second you got nosy." I forced tears to the surface, playing weak. "Daniel, I don't know what you're talking about," he roared. "Don't lie to me." The sound rattled the picture frames on the wall. For a long moment, we just stared at each other. His breath is heavy. My heart is pounding. Then, something in me snapped too. I stood, voice low but steady. "You're right. I know everything. The forged signatures, the accounts in my name, the women, the lies, all of it." His face drained of color. You ungrateful bitch," he whispered, but I didn't stop. "And guess what, Daniel? You admitted it. Every word. On tape." His mouth opened, closed. He stumbled back a step. For the first time, he looked small. He laughed suddenly. Sharp, bitter. "You think anyone will believe you? You're nothing. A nurse with no head for money. I built this life. Without me." I cut him off, calm as ice. "Without you, I'm free. And you're finished." His laugh died. I walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer, and laid the USB stick on the counter. "This is already in 3 places, with people who hate you as much as I do, hurt me, and it all goes straight to the feds." His eyes flicked to the USB like it was a loaded gun. Because it was. He sank into a chair, running his hands over his face. This isn't happening," he muttered. "I'll fix it. I'll make it go away." I watched him tremble, the arrogance stripped raw, leaving only fear, and I whispered, almost gently, "No, Daniel. You can't fix this. You can't fix me." The next day, I made the call. I handed everything to the investigators: emails, documents, texts, the recording. They thanked me, told me it would be handled, and just like that, the trap snapped shut. 2 weeks later, federal agents came to our door. Daniel's face went white as they read the charges: fraud, forgery, wire transfers, crimes committed under my name, but proven to be his. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, as they let him out in handcuffs. He looked back once, eyes wild. "You did this to me, Rachel. You'll regret it." I said nothing, because I didn't need to. That night, the house was silent. No footsteps, no clinking glasses, no muttered insults, just me. Alone, I walked through the rooms, touching the walls, the furniture, the remnants of the life he thought he owned. And though the air was free of him, it wasn't peaceful, because revenge doesn't bring back what you lost. It only leaves ashes, and tomorrow, I would have to decide what to do with them. The house was quiet after they took him. Too quiet. For years, Daniel's presence filled every space: his voice, his arrogance, his shadow. And now, only silence remained. You'd think I'd feel free, But freedom doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like walking through ashes, barefoot, wondering how much of yourself burned away too. The investigators kept me busy, meetings, testimonies, endless forms to prove my innocence. Each paper I signed felt like a scar. They believed me. The evidence was undeniable. But still, I had to sit there while strangers dissected my life, my marriage, my worth. Daniel's empire collapsed overnight. His accounts are frozen. His clients fled. His mistress? She disappeared into the shadows as quickly as she had entered. And me? I was left with a house I didn't want, debts I didn't create, and a name forever tied to his crimes. One evening, I walked into our bedroom, my bedroom now. His cologne still lingered in the closet. His watch sat abandoned on the dresser. I stared at it for a long time before shoving it into a drawer. I thought of his words, "You're nothing without me," and I realized he was wrong. I had been nothing with him. Without him, I was something. Raw, broken, scarred, but real. The last time I saw him was in the courtroom. He was thinner, hollow-eyed, still trying to smirk, but it trembled at the edges. When the judge read the sentence, years behind bars, he turned to look at me. His lips moved around the same old words. "You'll regret this." But I didn't. I only stared back, calm, empty, letting him see that his power over me was dead. Afterward, I walked out of that courthouse into the crisp Ohio air. The sky was gray. The trees are bare. I stood on the steps, my breath fogging, and felt not joy, not triumph, just clarity. Revenge doesn't heal you. It doesn't erase the years stolen, the scars left behind. It just returns the balance. It makes sure the person who caged you can never cage you again. I won't forgive Daniel. I don't need to. Forgiveness is for people who still carry love. And all I carry now is freedom. And maybe that's enough.